Our speaker is Annette Johnson. She's the founder of AJ Leads LLC, which is a boutique consultancy focused on leadership, empowerment, and development. With over 30 years of global experience in HR, Annette is known for her commitment to ethical leadership and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is a certified leadership coach for women and the founder of the Fly Coach, guiding women to lead and soar, where she helps individuals unlock their potential. As an alumni and mentor for Women Unlimited Incorporated, Annette is passionate about supporting the next generation of female leaders. Beyond the corporate world, she is the author of Forgive and Love Yourself, Fly, a book that encourages self love and personal growth. Annette also shares self care and resilience strategies on her video podcast called Living in the Good Space. Dedicated to service, she volunteers as a faculty member for professional development programs and coaches women impacted by intimate partner violence. Above all, Annette is a proud wife, a mom of two daughters, and granddog parent to Snoop and Cole. Her work reflects a deep commitment to compassion, empowerment, and creating lasting impact. So, without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Annette.
I had myself on mute. Sorry about that. Thank
It's
you
all
for that
right.
great introduction. Oh, there's so many people here today. It's so good to be in
Yes.
this space with my HR colleagues and comrades. I'll say I've worked in the HR space, the corporate HR space, in mostly leadership roles throughout my entire career. So feel very comfortable being here today. And kudos to you for picking this topic, for teeing this topic up, because it has become a hot topic lately for those that are, popping into the news every now and again. And so I think it definitely is an important topic for HR professionals to have. So thank you. Thank you for having me. I am somewhat informal as a facilitator. I really like to hear from people and hear your perspectives. So please don't worry about interrupting me. Get my attention. If you have a thought, if you have a question, it will not disrupt me at all. And as they said in the comments, feel free to use chat, come off mute, and I will make sure that we make space to hear from you. So I can share my screen now. Okay, let me share my screen and I will pull up the presentation. Okay, oh, here we go. Here's my presentation. Share. Just give me a second to get this going. Worked perfectly, right? When we did the test.
You take your time.
Okay, there we go. There we go. So want to just start, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so everybody can see it. Want to start with what I call my communication agreements. I use these agreements in trainings or discussions that I facilitate, especially around sensitive topics or topics that can kind of stir up emotions. And so it's simple, right? I encourage people to listen, to understand, to resist the urge to interrupt. I don't normally have a problem there. Avoid judging, even where you sit as you're taking this information in and as you're self-reflecting or you're hearing the comments of others. Stay open-minded because I think when we listen to different perspectives, that gives us an opportunity to expand our own perspective around certain things. I encourage everyone to speak up, respect different viewpoints, and at the end of the day, I'm not here to force people to agree on a specific stance or perspective. I think we can give ourselves permission to agree to disagree. So those are my communication agreements. If there are any additional ones that you think are important, please drop it in the chat so everybody can see those. I'm gonna move move to the time that we have allotted. So I want to pace myself and make sure that we get through everything, but an hour goes by so fast. But these are the objectives, right? We want to understand what body positivity is. What does it mean? What are the implications when we are not practicing body positivity? Talk and double click down into body positivity and specifically talk about some of the different stereotypes and unpack weight bias a little bit because that's something that is really prevalent today, and then talk about how we can create some supportive policies and practices, and there's some things that you already are aware of that are in place that maybe you can leverage further. And then I'd like to save some time at the end for us to talk about, as HR professionals and leaders, how do we help those people managers in our workplaces, and how do we help them be positioned to protect the culture, so to speak, and to create an inclusive culture for everyone. So the first poll is, and I believe I have help here, the first poll that we're running is, have you ever had to challenge your own assumption on or biases about body positivity in the workplace? So would love to get a sense from the group what your perspective is there. Looking like most people are being transparent and saying yes occasionally. Others, yes occasionally is growing. So big group in yes occasionally. And then about 10% yes often. I asked this question, and I think this poll is important because before we can kind of unpack this topic and dive into it, I think it's important for us to understand our own position, right? What is our own self-thoughts around this topic? How does it show up in our interactions, in our communication, in how we view our work, the world, the people in our world and work? So I think it's important for us to have that heightened sense of self-awareness. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. So we've landed at about 60, more than half say yes occasionally, small percentage often. And some people saying maybe, but not consciously, right? So it shows up, acknowledging the fact that it probably shows up, but not something that you do intentionally. And then a couple of people who say no. All right, we can end that poll and we can move on. So body positivity in the workplace. What do we mean by that? Any thoughts, any comments on, what we mean by body positivity? How do you define it? You can come off mute, or if you want to drop your thoughts in chat. Brandy, are you seeing anything show up in chat around the response to this? What is body positivity?
No comments in chat yet.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. It's the practice of fostering a culture where all employees feel respected, valued, and confident in their bodies, regardless of size, shape, age, physical ability, or appearance. Right? So it's what it says. It's the definition is what it says. Body positive. It's being positive about how we should, like, who we are as a person and our physical nature, right? Regardless of skin color, regardless of what size we are, whatever our physical abilities or appearance. And it involves challenging stereotypes and biases and promoting well-being and belonging. And so as we go through this content today, the one thing that I hope you walk away with today is a heightened sense of self-awareness around the role that you might play based on your position in your organization, based on the relationships you have, your role, your responsibility. I'm hoping that you walk away with a heightened sense of self-awareness about what can you do from where you sit to challenge stereotypes and biases and to promote well-being and belonging in your workplaces. Because that I do believe that that's something that we're all we can all play a role in. I do believe that our leaders, our senior leaders, our executives, our people managers have a additional level of responsibility because they're responsible for making decisions and driving strategy and compensation and performance management, promotions, etc. So I do believe that they have a heightened sense of responsibility, but I also believe that we can all play a role in cultivating a culture of inclusion. So I want to talk about body positivity in the media for a minute, because I'm pretty sure that we're all, I can't see everybody, but by a virtual show of hands, how many people are on social media? Do we have yes, so I see some hands going up, right? So you can't be on social media today and not have a perspective on the role that media plays in body positivity. So I'm curious if anybody wants to just pop off and share really quick. What does the what messages does the media send about body image today? Does anybody have any perspective on, what they see or the messages that they walk away with from media? I see a hand raised. Leah?
I'm not sure if her hand was raised from
Oh,
the
oh,
previous
okay.
thing. I
Okay.
did want to add though, as far as social media, from what I see, is this um, sort of push for exercising and to the point where you are, ripped and small and
Hmm.
all these things.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's a big push on being fit, right? And usually those images that come with being fit are slim, right?
Yes.
A very petite size. Yes.
In the chat, we have often negative and stereotypes are prevalent.
So the media still plays a role in projecting images that they want to project around certain body types or gender versus female, our LGBTQ community. They play a big role in kind of setting the stage for those images and sending messages, whether they're intentional or non-intentional, about the different diversity groups.
Annette, we had another comment, a few
Mm,
comments. We have unreal and offensive at times.
hmm.
And then
Hmm.
another one said, I see media will slam celebrities for being too skinny, but then turn around and slam the same celebrity for putting on weight as they age.
Yes, yes. If you spend any time just surfing the web and looking at just media images, even in our own workplaces, right? Looking at the images that are projected around our internal marketing and communications or around our products, right? The products that our companies sell. I've spent a lot of time studying that because of the roles that I've had. And it's very interesting that, there are certain types that are pushed through marketing and through the different media platforms. And so as someone who's been focused on DEI for the past 5 years, that's one of the things that I would challenge with companies that I consulted with is to diversify their marketing, right? The images in their marketing, whether it's internal or whether it's external. Because if you want to be inclusive and practice inclusiveness, then people need to be able to see themselves in your communications, in your marketing. So let's look at this a little bit. Somebody said unrealistic beauty standards, fostered comparison culture. Somebody mentioned that, like, you get slammed if you're too skinny and then slammed if you put on weight, and excluded marginalized bodies. So, the media plays a big role in this body image that is presented. And whether it is unconscious or conscious, they're judgments that they make and that people also make based on what they see in the media about people's different appearance. So I want to share some with you. Size and weight, definitely, it's one of the things that we're going to unpack a little bit. Colorism, hang on a second, let me just move this over. Colorism, gender, disability, fitness, we talked about fitness, facial. and ageism. Ageism.
Actually,
So
we had
take,
a comment on the ageism. Someone said
yeah,
lots of messaging that aging is just purely negative,
yes.
especially for women.
Yes, yes. I've been in conversations, different settings where women of a certain age talk about this concept of disappearing, right? You're not seen, you're not heard, you're dismissed because you are of a certain age. There are more older workers in the workforce today, right? The average worker is not retiring at 52 or 55. So there are more older workers in the workforce today. And there are older workers who are challenged with upward mobility because they believe it's because of their age, or challenged with getting a job because they believe because of their age. Any others? Any other comments around what's here?
That's all we have in the chat.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know one of the topics that you wanted to talk about was weight bias. So let's talk about weight bias for a little bit. And what do we mean by weight bias? What comes to mind when you hear that term weight bias? Any thoughts from the group?
Initial microaggressions for me, just your initial thought sometimes when um, see someone of a different size than you. In the
Hmm.
chat, we have some people assume that someone who is overweight is lazy.
Mm, yes. Yes. Classic
Yes.
stereotype, right?
Yes.
Classic stereotype. Others. Any other thoughts? Is anyone aware of a recent situation in the news with Lyft, the company, the rideshare company Lyft? There was a situation in the news recently, and maybe it's been about a month or so now. They refused to the person who called for the lift, they refused to take the person because of her size. She is a rapper known in Detroit. I was not aware of her until this situation went viral. But the reports say that she weighs in excess of 400 pounds. And when the Lyft driver came and saw her, refused to take her to her destination and canceled the ride. And she now has a lawsuit against Lyft. And to add insult to injury, she was invited by, obviously this was viral. She was invited by a lot of the different talk shows and media outlets for an interview. She went on one of the interviews and got there and had to ask for an accommodating chair because the chair that they had for her would not have held her weight. So even in inviting this person to talk about this situation, they were not self-aware enough to make sure that the studio was set up to accommodate this person.
Wow. We have some comments in the chat. People also assume that a person who appears to be fit is healthy, which
Mm,
is not always the case.
yes,
Then
yes,
people, assume that you eat a lot, and that there's not a
yes.
sickness present.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, yes. And
And
that
then, of
people,
course, undisciplined again.
yes, I was just going to say, or they assume that people don't want to get fit, don't want to exercise.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, all good points. So it's negative judgment, stereotyping, discrimination that's directed at people based on their weight, especially those who are in larger bodies, and it could be explicit or it could be implicit. Um, and so we're talking about these different stereotypes, and I want to share some more body image stereotypes, but I want you to hold your thoughts on this question. Like, how does this show up at work? Right? I want you to be thinking about, how does this play out at work? How do you know that there is a potential for this bias at work? Because if it can be explicit or implicit, you may not always know. So just hold that thought as we continue to go through. So we talked about some of the body image stereotypes already, and I think we've hit on some of these. That thin is healthy or beautiful. Muscular represents masculinity. Curvy represents feminine. Larger bodies are lazy or unhealthy. You touched on that. Aging bodies are undesirable. People with disabilities or physical differences might be perceived as unattractive. And transgender people, you have to look trans in order to be trans. I don't even know what that means. I tried to unpack that a little bit in my research. And I'm assuming that, if it's not obvious to the person, then, they don't feel as though they have to consider that someone could be trans. So we've talked about these stereotypes. You've mentioned a couple of these. And so I want to put this question on the table. How does body image bias impact employees and the work environment? How does it show up? How do you know that it could be a potential problem? I was going to do a small group breakout around this, but I don't think we can do that. So please feel free to drop your comments in chat, or I'd love to hear from you. Come off mute and share your perspective.
When I think of this question, it makes me think of, you know, being inclusive and someone feeling um, uncomfortable to the point where you're not getting collaboration. And
Hmm.
so I think that's a way it could show up in the work environment is sort of this decreased collaboration because we're going in a room with, again, chairs that may not accommodate
Hmm.
all these things that, sometimes are on your mind when struggling with weight.
Hmm.
Um, in the chat, we do have it can make people feel bothered when evaluating offers furniture that is inclusive.
Hmm.
There are various trends identifying people who have not fully transitioned. And so
Hmm.
where they are in the journey causes others to make judgments
Hmm.
um, that they are not really trans.
Hmm.
Employees who are perceived to be lazy might not volunteer to be part of groups.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, these are good, y'all. Keep dropping them in.
Yeah, yeah. This can show up not only just the body image bias, but bias period, right? We're focusing on body image as a topic today, but think about other biases, right? And how that could
Yeah.
impact people as well.
Here's
Um, yeah.
Annette, we have a really good one. When an applicant reviews the open job description about lifting, standing, and dexterity, is it safe to assume, and this was a discussion question, is it safe to assume that the candidate can do the job requirement or is appropriate to reconfirm with a question like, are there any questions about the job requirement from the published job description? I'll have to reread that one and piece it.
Hmm.
Having to pay extra for airline tickets
Hmm.
um,
And I mean, we've seen
is a
this in the
good.
news, in the media play out, right? People who require the extended seatbelt, and they talk about some of the experiences that how it made them feel, the way they were treated, or if they chose to purchase two seats. So there are so many examples that exist today, and I think the important thing, like I said earlier, is walking away today understanding like what role do we play? I say we because I consider myself an HR professional. What role do we play in cultivating an inclusive culture, right? Because sometimes we become aware of things, we see things, we hear things, and what's our responsibility once we become aware? What do we do? And so I have another question that we'll explore shortly about how do we as HR professionals and leaders, like what do we do to make sure that we are promoting an inclusive work environment?
And Annette, to clear up that last statement,
Mhm.
the charge there is it appropriate for us to reconfirm with the candidate with a question? We would ask them a question like, do you have any questions about the job requirements that were published on that job description? That way we're being inclusive. Like you said, when
Yes.
we're thinking outside of just different types of biases. And then we have another comment. It could negatively impact employee engagement and performance if
Yes.
someone feels others are biased against them,
Hmm.
and an inclusive culture isn't encouraged.
Yes. Yes, and going back to the previous question, consistency is the key, right? So it's not picking and choosing who you want to validate the job description requirements with, right? It's something that you would do with every candidate. And so not
Yes.
candidates that you think it needs to be, validated for some reason. Their appearance
Yes.
might trigger that for you, but to be consistent in the process and make sure that you are asking that of all candidates. Good stuff. Any other comments or questions?
This is really good stuff, y'all. None right now in the chat.
I want to share a quick story with you. And it came to me as I was preparing for this session, and it brought back the emotions that I felt at the time. And so I used to lead a global business ethics and integrity team and a 24/7 vendor, a helpline. And so all employee complaints came to my team, and we were responsible for overseeing the investigation, meeting with employees, doing the intakes, and working with the corporate governance groups to resolve the matter. And there was I won't say the company. There was a person who raised a complaint because they felt they were being harassed because of their size, and the harassment was showing up like people leaving notes on the person's desk, um, air fresheners. It was a person of a larger size. And so the harassment was insinuating that the person had body odor. And so this was emotionally um, disruptive for the person. The person was emotionally traumatized by this. It just disrupted her ability to show up her best self and to perform at the high levels that she was used to performing at. We did a full investigation. It came back unfounded. She was met with, talked to. It was unfounded. And it came back to me when I was preparing for this because I said, I always thought that it was an assumption that was being made based on her size and her ethnicity. So I thought it was a bias that was connected to her ethnicity and to her size. And so I share that today because the impact can be so much deeper than we even recognize. This person came forward and had the courage to say, this is what's happening, and this is why I think it's happening, and this is what's how it's affecting me. But a lot of times people they don't share. They suffer in silence, and then it shows up in different ways in their performance, their attendance, their relationship building, their communication, etc. So I want to do another poll. How comfortable are you discussing body image topics in the workplace? I see very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, neutral. Okay. So about 67% are comfortable. And then there's the other 35% or so, 33% or so that are not. And so I think it's important. Thank you for participating in the poll because again, I think self-awareness is important um, for our roles and for the work that we do to promote and maintain inclusive cultures. And so knowing your level of comfort in discussing this is very important. And why? Why? I'm going to ask you the question. Why is it important? Why is your level of comfort in discussing these topics important as HR professionals or leaders in the organization?
Because I think if we sort of normalize the conversation, it will just bring more awareness. Hopefully, policies start to change,
Hmm.
those types of things. But I think it individually, um, we have to be comfortable enough to even have the conversations and to be allies.
Yes, yes,
In the chat, you have a right, you have to set the right example. So that's
yes,
good. Yeah.
yeah. You have to set the right example. And we know as HR professionals that when an employee brings a matter that could could be a protected class, a protected right, that we have a responsibility to look into that, to raise it, to address it. We have a responsibility to make sure that employees understand how to raise issues and concerns, and to get those issues and concerns addressed. And so, I always say, if a culture is silent and there's no issues at all being shared, then you don't have a speak up culture. Right? You don't have a culture where people are comfortable speaking up and sharing their concerns or thoughts or ideas. And so that could be a problem in and of itself. Are leaders comfortable, engaging with HR around certain issues that they may become aware of or that are impacting their team culture? Are they comfortable raising them, seeking advice, getting guidance? Are employees comfortable raising them, raising those concerns? So that's important to having an inclusive culture. Silence doesn't always mean that there's no issue. So we can't rest on, well, we don't really get a lot of complaints. Employees don't raise issues. Our employee opinion satisfaction results are not too bad. We don't get complaints raised through our employee opinion surveys. We can't always rest on that. We need to kind of have our ear to the floor. We need to be engaged. We need to be engaged with our leaders, build relationships across the parts of the organization that we're responsible for serving, having conversations with people, attending meetings, being present. That's the way that you really get to understand and know the culture of an organization. And we know that there are many micro cultures that make up an organization. Any thoughts or comments? Anything anyone would add to what I just said? All right. So I'm sure you are aware of these general protections, but I just wanted to go through them because the question was, what policies do we need to design? And I think the question is, are you aware of existing policies that could potentially cover issues that arise around body image or bias at any level? I think it's important to understand. And so we know that we have our anti-discrimination laws, and they can be leveraged to challenge body image biases based on what the issue is, if it involves a disability or gender expression. So just understanding our anti-discrimination laws and how they may cover some potential body image biases is important. ADA can include individuals with eating disorders, a body dysmorphia, health conditions. So again, understanding that there could be a correlation or a connection based on what the issue is. And I believe at the end of the day, it's important. I worked very, very closely with the employment lawyers. I had a good relationship with our employment lawyers, with our employee relations specialists, with our compliance and risk management managers across the company. And so I don't think we as HR professionals are expected to be subject matter experts on everything, but I think we do need to be aware of when there's a potential issue, something that could potentially be a problem and cause a risk for a company that could have a legal implication or a policy implication. I think we need to be aware of that, and we need to know how to tap into the subject matter experts across the company to get some expert guidance there and to test it and say, is this an issue? Is this something that we should be concerned about? And to get some feedback or guidance from those subject matter experts on what you should do, what role you should play. The Crown Act, relatively new, but the Crown Act prohibits discrimination based on natural hair. I'm a natural hair girl. And so, and there are more and more women who wear their hair, Black women who wear their hair natural. And so the Crown Act exists to prohibit discrimination. You can't discriminate against Black women because of their hair texture, whether they wear locks or braids or twists or whatever, or an afro, whatever. So being aware of that. And then your US state and local protections. So each state has different protections. Some states have laws that prohibit any type of body image bias, but then there are other states that don't. So I think it's just important for you to understand what your local states are. laws are as well. And then be aware of your workplace policies around inclusive appearance, natural hair, your dress codes, if dress codes even still exist. Requirements. Somebody mentioned the job requirements. Do we need to validate those? When you think about job requirements, the weightlifting, right, and making sure you're consistent with those policies, and making sure that your hiring managers who interview are consistent there. Your requirements around uniforms, right? If you work for a company where there's a uniformed part of your population, making sure that those sizes are inclusive, and it's not a one size fits all or a small to extra large, that it encompasses larger sizes for larger bodies. So I know that you're probably all aware of these, but I think the question is not, do we need to create new policies? I think it is, we need to be aware of existing policies and laws and how they might apply to potential issues that come up in the workplace. And I think on an annual basis, it's always a good idea to look at existing HR policies to see if there room for revision or expansion in any way. Any questions or comments here?
I had a comment, Annette, while you were talking. When you said uniform, it made me think of an experience that I witnessed. So we were in a staff meeting, and again, this was a long time ago, but we were in a staff meeting, and it was time to pass out shirts. And, it was just a thing that we did where we would say, hey, who needs a medium, or what size
Hmm.
do you need? And one day a girl said a large, and there were some people snickering. And I just can't, now that we're talking about this, I can't imagine how traumatizing that was in that moment, and how it could have been prevented. We could have
Yeah.
just discussed, passed out shirts in a more private setting instead of doing it
Hmm.
at the all hands staff meeting. But
Yes.
those small things really help because I mean, they have a bigger impact than we probably realize.
Yes, yes. And so in a situation like that, it's such an easy fix. You can say, have a person designated to get the sizes.
Yes.
Send me, your size requirement by, Friday at noon, instead of hashing it out in front of everybody. And then this way, if there's somebody who needs a special size, a size that is not a part of the regular inventory, they can have that private conversation and you can accommodate them in private.
Yes.
Any other comments?
We have a comment in the chat. Agree 100%. It is important to review policies annually to make sure the language is neutral to personal
Hmm.
characteristics.
Hmm. Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. I want to do a time check. What time do we have to end by?
12:20 is when we wrap up and do our
Okay.
ending. So you have about 10 more minutes
Okay, great.
of
Because I want
presentation.
to,
Yes.
yes, great. I want to spend some time um, on this next question, and I want to stop sharing so that I can see those who choose to be off camera. But this is the question for the next couple of minutes. And I'm going to say what can we as HR professionals and leaders do to prevent body image bias at work? Or we can flip it and say to create a more inclusive environment for all body types. And I'm going to stop sharing. Um, and for those who want to come on camera and have this conversation, I invite you to do that. I think it's an important question, and it's the call to action. You have given up your time today to listen to me and to have this discussion. And I want to have some clear takeaways that you can walk away with and consider as move forward with your daily responsibilities. So what can we do as HR professionals and leaders to create a more inclusive environment for all body types? What are some things that come to mind? That one Brandy, the point that you just brought up about the t-shirt is a perfect takeaway. And that happens so often, right? And we're going into the summer. And so a lot of organizations have, baseball teams and basketball teams, or we do these employee engagement events where
Mm-hmm.
sometimes t-shirts are involved. So that's a great takeaway, is to create a process where people can, privately send in their size requirements and not have to do that in a public forum.
Yes, that's good. I think just confidentiality,
Yeah.
period. Even with in the chat, we have something about ordering food.
Mm,
Even those types of things that you just don't think about mentioning, everybody might have had a sandwich and somebody else might have wanted a hamburger. So just really being conscious that you are just respecting, not always protected classes, this confidential piece, but just doing things in private out of respect.
Food is another big one, and I've been in settings many times where there might be, I think vegetarian is kind of the norm, right? So when
Hmm.
I used to be responsible for producing leadership offsites, and so we would send out a survey to get dietary needs. But being respectful of people's different dietary needs. Some people don't eat meat. Some people are vegetarian. Some people are pescatarian. Some, you know, there are people who have special diets because of health needs. So just being sensitive
Yes,
to that and not judging that.
that's really good.
How do we help our leaders, our people managers? For those that are HR business partners and you have, segments of the company that you're responsible for, I'd love to hear from some of you. Like, how do you help leaders, people leaders, create more inclusive environments? And how do you help them to kind of watch out for potential issues that could come from body image bias? Is there anyone that's in an HR business partner role that might want to share? No? Okay. Any
Yeah,
people?
I wasn't sure if Tiffany was going to speak.
Oh,
I'm not in an HR business partner role,
hmm
but I am in a sort of leadership development role. And so
hmm
when I think about the, decks that I'm creating,
hmm
and scripts, sometimes you have to help people think about it because they just, based on their journey in life, their experiences, sometimes they just don't think about, um, the way that they think. They don't consciously think
hmm
about the way that they think. I mean, I think sometimes, like I said, from an HR standpoint and getting our leaders to think about it, just in the scripts, or putting notes beside scripts. Hey, when you mention this, keep in mind,
hmm
um, um, our standard, when we do our SOPs, just saying, hey, this is our standard. We make sure we say these things. We don't say these things. A lot of do's and don'ts,
Right.
prescriptive for people, who, like I said, different cultures and may just not have experienced, certain things.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about things like promotion, right? Advancement or project assignment, and how body image bias can play a role in who gets assigned to a highly visible project,
Mm,
who is on the succession planning track, right, for advancement. Who is more out front versus more behind the scenes in terms of role assignment. So there's so many layers to how bias can show up and impact our decision making as people managers, right? We write performance reviews, we recommend promotions, we handle compensation treatment, right? So any unconscious bias that we have, and we all have it, you know, we have to be self-aware enough to challenge that and ask ourselves the question, well, what makes me think this way? What's making me draw this conclusion? What's making me lean towards this decision? What's driving my action and my behavior around this particular matter? Like, condition ourselves and get used to challenging our own biases by asking ourselves the tough questions. Why do I feel this way? Why am I reacting this way? Why do I tend to lean to this person versus the other five people that are on my team? So, just being self-aware and asking ourselves those questions.
That's good.
One thing that I guess has really changed, I work in healthcare, are tattoos,
Mm,
which are part of body expression for individuals that, used to all got to be covered up. And
hmm
now we're moving more towards more of a celebration of some of those because, this is about mom or eh, allowing people to talk about some of their tattoos that have some level of meaning to them.
hmm hmm
Um,
That's a
and
good one. That's a good one, Dennis.
open up a conversation about who that person is as a contributor to your team.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And, it's so easy to, to come up with a stereotype for someone who has tattoos. If you see one little tattoo, it's probably not a big deal. But if you see someone's whole arm tattooed, or if you see, tattoos on where they're visible, right? It's so easy. Yeah.
And into their, I mean, people like step back from that.
Yeah.
And so that's
And
another piece that weight and some of the other things that I regularly think about. But the tattoos have really evolved over the past
yes,
years.
yes. And I've had to challenge myself in full transparency because I've had stereotype, I've had bias or no, I won't say bias, but stereotype.
Uh-oh, she froze on us, y'all.
And she had such a good point, I'm sure.
Yes, she did.
Oh,
She may have to drop off and come back to wrap us up. When she pops, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen while she's popping back on in case you all want to um, get connected with her. I'll have that up until she comes back. I'll give her a couple minutes to pop back. I'll give her one, we'll give her one full minute, you all, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, I got a comment that said the QR code did not work. So maybe she'll,
get really close. Mine did.
yours worked. Oh, okay, you had to get really close.
Yeah, get really close, and then it does finally populate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up while she's popping back on. I appreciate you all for your time. I appreciate you all for participating. Thank you for your questions, for your comments. This was really, really, really rich information. Um, oh, there she is. I'll let her pop back in. Hey, Annette.
I am so sorry. I don't know what is going on with my
Th-
internet today,
That's
but I
all
did want to
right.
Yeah, I did want to come back just to say again, thank you for having me come in and speak. You can
Yes.
get more information about how to contact me if you choose in the future. And I just wanted to say in closing that I hope that the information that was shared today will help you think about how you can contribute to an inclusive culture around this topic from where you sit. You don't have to be in a senior leadership role. You don't have to be a people manager. But as an HR professional, we are responsible for being stewards of a positive and inclusive culture. So I hope that there's something that was shared to help you think about that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annette. Thank you so, so much. Like I said, thank you all for joining us today. I'll pop back on camera. If you're like me, you're leaving this conversation full with actionable takeaways to be a better person and to be a better steward and a better team member in your organization. But you have the QR code. I'll pop that back up on the screen for you all so you can snap that to get some more information. I did want to share just a few upcoming MT Sherm events. Tomorrow, April 18th, Friday, MTSU Breakfast Series. It's called Best Foot Forward, Navigating a Path to Success. So the focus is key habits and strategies for early career success. Then we have our career transition groups that are on Mondays. So we have our next one, April 21st. It's at 4 o'clock from 4 to 5:30. It is virtual and it's just support for HR professionals who are navigating career changes. And then we have on April 22nd, Elder Care is Everywhere. It's a webinar and it's about what caregiving employees need from their employers. So the focus there is on best practices to support your employees that are caregivers. So we would love to see you all at some more MT Sherm events. Thank you so much for joining today. Like I said, that you will get an email in a few days with your CE credit information. After this presentation, you will get a survey to complete, and we'll just use that feedback to keep providing relevant topics for you all. Thank you so much for coming, you all. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Brandy, for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'm a former president of MT Sherm. And I now live in Florida, but obviously I stay connected to the MT Sherm world. So uh,
Wonderful. Well, we're glad to have you,
I,
Dennis.
I love seeing what you guys are doing with webinars and stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you for being a part.
All
I'll
right.
pop this back on the screen until you all feel the need to drop off. Thank you so much.